What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 20 best Path of Exile 2 builds in 2025. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on, then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both leveling and endgame, and then finally we will go over the passive tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what charm should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you're looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video's description or the pinned comment. This build is currently one of the best and fastest setups that you can use to farm maps and other endgame content. Like you can see from the gameplay, we are basically deleting enemies in split seconds. And on top of this, we can also delete bosses by having also a very high boss damage, by using the cast on shock and the ball lightning. At some point in the later game, some lower gear players might run into a mana problem, but lucky for us, the ranger has many tools to address this problem, and with the optimized gear we need nothing more than a single stat roll on our weapon or gear to completely solve this issue. This setup's main playstyle is built around using the Tree Dragon Mask, which will allow our Lightning Warp to build up the freeze, in order to proc a cast on freeze, with the Lightning Conduit which will do massive amounts of AoE damage, due to the natural shock ground which is provided by our Lightning Warp. On top of this, we are going to be using nodes like the Mind Over Matter, Eldritch Battery, and many more to increase our damage and convert all of our shields to mana. Our build will be very mana hungry, but because of our setup we are going to be easily fixing this and increasing our AoE damage at the same time. This build focuses on the Flicker Strike, which generates massive amounts of frenzy charges from the combat frenzy, by freezing and electrocuting enemies, which then we can even further convert to the power charges with our Resonance Keystone. Every time we have the power charges, we want to spend them on the Flicker Strike, to basically fly through multiple screens of the enemies like you can see from the gameplay. Sometimes we get so many rapid dashes that we can get one-shotted, just by how many enemies we dash through. And that's why for defense we want to focus on building up our physical damage reduction and shield charges, which are then further doubled by our Grim Feast buff. This build is known as the Explosive Shot build, which as you can see from the gameplay, can blow up and destroy a huge amount of enemies by using the Explosive Shot, Shock Burst, and many more skills. However, for our playstyle to work we will need to use the Tree Dragon Mask, but lucky for us, this headpiece is pretty cheap and easy to acquire, by just simply buying it or trading it. Overall, Deadites have a shock buff, which means that now by using the specific items, we will convert our ability to ignite with fire damage to now get a shock chance instead. This setup is known as the Spark Sorceress, which has one of the most visually impressive playstyles in the game, as Sorceress can paralyze and destroy monsters with a barrage of lightning. Our build has insane mobility and great speed farming potential, by shredding through maps and hardened content with ease. The Archmage with Lightning Conduit and the Spark skills together make up the bulk of our insane DPS. So if you want to fill your entire screen with the sparks of lightning and speed clear through hundreds of enemies in few seconds, then this is the one for you. This setup is the Spirit Minion build, which summons Raging Spirits by casting the Flame Wall for offense. And then also for defense we get to command a minion army. So unlike most other setups where they only command or cast spells, well in this one we get to do both, and thus increase our DPS even higher. By using specific gear and building our skill tree around the nodes like the Power of the Dead, Fear the Dead, Silent Guard, and many more, it will enable us to upgrade our minions and projectile area and damage. So if we are ready to explode anyone and everyone that stands in our way, while also getting a skeleton army that follows and protects you, then this is it. This setup is very popular because of how easy and cheap it is to get it, and also its poison damage scales from the poisonous concoction, so you don't need to worry about having the perfect damage uptime, because the poison takes the care of that by itself. Your main gameplay will focus around running in a map and using anything more than just the poisonous concoction. Most monsters will die very fast, because of the poison that gets spread to them from the contagious concoction. However, in the situations where the mobs are a lot, like in the breaches, then you can use the contagion to spread the poison in even bigger area. So as you can tell, this is a very OP and spammy build. This setup's main focus is to lock down your enemies with quick freezes that last a long time. Even bosses are vulnerable to being frozen, and we can just lay down insane amount of DPS while they are stuck doing absolutely no damage. Your main gameplay will focus around using the Ice Strike to close the gap between the enemies. Then drop Tempest build to help you do more damage, and then activate your charged staff and the Shattering Palm to engage ranged enemies before they can even hit you, or just to completely melt them down in few seconds. This setup's main focus is built around the Galvanic shards and the Shockbuster rounds, that both act as the shotgun skills, which, as you can see from the gameplay, can melt a ton of enemies in split seconds. Our playstyle is built around the Shock and the Chain Lightning, as Galvanic shards have an amazing clear speed coming from the chains. Then the Shockbuster rounds have an insane single target damage, but require shock, so that's why we consistently use the Stormcaller arrow to get the crazy AoE buff and much more. This is the best warrior build by far. This setup's main focus is to run and press from 1 to 2 skills, and target big enemy groups to then weaken them and explode. One of the most powerful skills that we have in our arsenal is the Shockwave Totem, which does incredible amount of AoE damage, and as you can see from the gameplay, we are just simply running into the enemies and one-shotting them without even trying. Also, our Ancestral Warrior Totem and the Scavenge Planning makes the most out of this by effectively extending the damage of this hit in order to kill big targets like bosses or tanky rare monsters. This setup is known as the Bombarding Minions build that mainly uses the Skeletal Arsonist for both AoE and single target damage, while then you can further increase your DPS by casting Detonate Dead, which explodes dead enemy corpses and let us speed farm every single content in the game. This build is the best of both worlds because it combines very quick clearing speed with aggressive playstyle while also having minions that protect you, and at the endgame we will be able to reach from 15 to 13,000 energy shield, which will basically turn us into an unstoppable puppet master. This setup is structured around using the skill Bonestorm, which by itself is a slow clearing ability, but with the right gems, passives and synergies we can make it 100 times better. And this is exactly what we have right here. This build also has 2 variants, so going full crit chance, what I personally use for myself, or perhaps go with the Detonated Dead variant. Both of these will excel at different things, so which one you choose is up to you. The full crit chance setup excels at huge amount of damage. We won't be focusing on anything else besides the massive crits, and stacking as much life as possible, because the more life we have, the more damage we can do in return. This build is pretty much a big AoE warrior that focuses on armor breaking offensively, and then the block defensively. Our main playstyle will revolve around using the Stampede skill, which will charge our character forwards and create patches of the jagged ground, which then are exploded when the final slam portion of the ability is executed, so we will be able to basically one-shot huge amount of grouped up enemies. And on top of this, you will want to invest into the Giant's Blood Keystone, which will unlock the ability for us to use a two-handed weapon in just one hand, so then we could use a shield on our offhand. This setup's main playstyle is built around putting up a frost wall, and then blasting the enemies with the Ice Comet. And as cold penetration and cold exposure is very incredibly OP in the endgame, so this build works amazing on big groups of enemies, where we simply use 2 skill combo and cover our entire screen with the frost projectiles that explode and do massive amounts of damage. On top of this, we are going to be using nodes like the Now and Again, Footprint in the Sand and many more, to simply reset our cooldowns so we can basically spam our frost walls 24/7. This build scales Ignite from our attacks and targets big enemy groups to then set them on fire and explode. And one of the most powerful skills that we have in our arsenal is the Hammer of the Gods, which does incredible amount of single target damage with no ailment penalty, but has a bit of a cooldown. So Ignite makes the most out of this, by effectively extending the damage of this hit many times over. And on top of this, our Ignite effect does damage based on the size of the hit that has been generated. Simply put, this setup is similar to the top tier Invoker build, just made in a lesser ascendancy in the Acolyte. This build will offer a unique playstyle, which is focused on lightning damage and the manipulation of the darkness powers. With the strong defensive capabilities of Embrace the Darkness as well as the Life and Energy Shield Leech, the Acolyte of Chayula offers a great set of tools for survival. But as far as his damage goes, it still can't compete with the rest of the monks. This build's main idea is built around putting up a frost wall, and then blasting enemies with the infinite amount of fireballs. Cold exposure in the combination with the fire skills is very incredibly OP in the endgame, so this build works amazing on big groups of enemies where we simply use 2 skill combo and cover our entire screen with the projectiles that explode and do massive amounts of damage. On top of this, we are going to be using nodes like the Scoring Winds, Constant Gale and many more to increase our cast speed and mana, so we could basically spam our frost walls and speed farm through every content. Most of the grenade builds were really fun when the game just released, and they really haven't got any major nerfs. However, what really happened is that players figured out better builds, so for now the grenade setups have fallen a lot. This build is structured around detonating the gas grenade with variety of detonator skills, such as the explosive shot or the explosive grenade, to create a screen-wide explosion that can one-shot massive amounts of enemy groups. Offensively, the gem-studded ascendancy allows us to create 2 copies of any support gem, which greatly improves our clearing speed, utility, and single target damage. So when we combine all of this, we can then create this build that has insane clearing speed and with this type of run and gun playstyle. This setup's main focus is to scale fire from our attacks and target big enemy groups to then set them on fire and explode. We are going to be taking advantage of the seemingly limitless power scaling of the demon, and then the massive damage of the fire skills. You will start all maps in the demon form and kill enemies, while its effect ramps up to 70 to 100 stacks, which then we disable the form and instantly reapply it to start the demon flame ramp all over again. And this way we will be able to stay in the demon form forever and have really good DPS at the same time. This setup was very popular in the initial release, but now it has fallen quite a lot. The Tempest Fury build focuses on a huge speed and distance buffs to then proc a cast when shocked, and summon hundreds of lightning balls to shock the enemies around. It also utilizes the cast on critical to occasionally spawn Orb of Storms to increase our CC and DPS potential even more.